All right, folks, welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. So this series is 52 Living Ideas, the book. What I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to pick ideas which have been the most influential ideas in the last 4 years of Meetup and which I have personally found useful. And so have many people in the Meetup. And I'm trying to convert them in as crisp a form as possible so that we can go through it very quickly, understand what it is, do a bunch of exercises, try it out, and see whether these ideas work for us, work for it, work for you. So that's what we're going to do. Most of our meetups are exploratory meetups. We are exploring different fields. This one is taking the exploration that we have done, saying, okay, this idea is very promising. How do I build this into my life? That's what this series of meetups is all about. And what I do is that I will put up the video for this meetup on YouTube within a day. And then I do a follow-up the next week. So if you have any further questions after having tried this idea, and this is particularly important for today's idea, I would be happy to answer the questions. I want to also see what your experience was. And I'm going to use that in order to improve the writing that I'm doing about the idea. I'm trying to keep the writing as tight, as brief as possible. So in each of these meetups, the writing will be there, right there on the meetup page. So that is the reference that we are going to start with. All right, so a little bit of history about this particular idea. I learned this from a manual for Center for Applied Rationality. They have many tools, but this is a particular tool that I found the most useful of all the tools. They call it the resolve cycles. And I experimented with it myself a lot. I talked to a small group of friends. Then I did 2 in-person meetups on this, 1 other meetup on Discord on this. And this is my 4th time or 5th time that I'm talking to people about this tool. Each time I made it simpler and simpler so that the heart of what the tool is trying to do is more apparent. So it is extremely simple tool, but of all the tools that I saw in that manual, this was the one that I found the most useful and that has been most life transforming for me. Okay, so this is my version of it. I would just call it 5-minute timers because it's much more easier to understand. So what is it? Okay, the basic idea is that our minds are amazing. And we can actually do things in 5 minutes that we don't think we can. And we don't do it because the idea of doing it never occurs to us. And we never set the purpose of trying to do it. When you set your mind a purpose of doing something, you're going to be astonished by what it is going to do. And this applies on any scale, but it particularly applies on a small scale. And I want to just show you what can be done in 5 minutes. Okay, that's the whole purpose of this tool. Okay, again, this is supposed to be, this is very practical, oriented. So I'm going to go through it. I encourage you to bring up the text on the meetup, which is there on the meetup page, and follow along, because I'm just going to describe what it is. It's very simple. I've tried to keep the description very simple. If there is any questions about or comments about the description, you can, send me a message or something like that, and I'll incorporate it. So what is it? So it's very simple. It's got 3 steps cycle. First is choose a tough problem to solve or a tough question to answer. Now, we are recording this and putting it up on YouTube. So for this purpose, don't choose a personal problem. Choose something which is not personal, that you would be comfortable in talking about, okay? But as a rule, this is just any tough problem. And you should feel there is no way I can do anything about this problem in 5 minutes. So choose only problems which you think are incredibly tough. choose questions which you say, there is no way I can answer anything. So that's the first step. Choose a tough problem to solve or a tough question to answer. Step 2, this is the just do it cycle, the Yoda cycle. Set a timer for 5 minutes and try to actually solve the problem or to answer the question fully in 5 minutes. No, don't just make a plan, try to completely solve it. Okay, so you're going to make your best effort to actually solve the problem. Okay, that's what you're trying to do. Okay, so that's the step number 2. Step number 3 is I call it the brainstorm cycle. Okay, so regardless of, so there are going to be 2 possibilities. One, you think that you have solved the problem, okay, and you're very happy with it. Or secondly, that that your attempt failed. Both are possible. Okay, we are holding open the possibility. When we go into the second step, we are going to say we're going to solve it, and we're going to try our best to solve it. Okay. The third step, it's the brainstorm cycle. So regardless of, even if you think that you have solved it, you assume that you have failed to solve it. And you say, what are the other ways? Now, we are not trying to actually solve this time. You're trying to say, what are the other possible ways of solving this problem? And you're trying to list as many of them as possible. Okay. This is if you think you've solved it. If you're not solved it, you ask yourself the same question. You say, okay, what are the possible ways in which this can be solved? Okay. That's it. So it is as simple as that, those 3 steps. All right. And what we're going to do is that we are actually going to we are going to do this. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But then please do not chat. Please do not, ask questions. You can listen. That's fine. But the whole purpose of these meetups is to actually learn a tool and to make it a standard part. So you will need a pen and a paper. I'll give you 30 seconds or 1 minute to go get a pen and a paper, or you can use your computer. You will need to do some writing, because in the first step, you're going to choose a tough problem. And then in the second step, I'm going to set a 5-minute timer, and we're going to actually try to solve it. Let's worry about the third step afterwards. Okay. So at this point, so I'm going to ask you to choose tough problem to solve or a tough question to answer. All right. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that. Go ahead and pick something. All right. I'm starting the alarm now. Make sure that it is tough. Right, folks? All right, folks. So it's time. So I hope all of you have a question, a tough question that you are trying to answer. If you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, but you don't have to. So it's up to you. If you want, you can go ahead and put it in the chat of the problem that you're trying to solve or a tough question. So let me put. I'm also going to be doing the same thing, same exercise with you. Okay, so in the past, people have asked all kinds of issues. Like there was a person who was facing, Alzheimer's disease. Okay, how can I deal with Alzheimer's? There was a person who was facing issues at work. Okay, how do I solve this work issue? So it's just the whole range of things. Okay, all right. So now I'm going to describe the second one, the second step, and then I'm going to open it for questions briefly for any clarifications of what we are trying to do. So again, this is the just do it cycle. We're going to set a 5-minute timer, and we are going to actually try to solve the problem or answer the question fully in 5 minutes. Okay, use all the 5 minutes, make sure that the answer is as good as possible. Don't just make a plan, try to completely solve it. That's what we are trying to do. Now, does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, go ahead and type an exclamation mark, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Shelly, go ahead, ask your question, but you're asking question only about this particular step, how to do it. Shelly,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, correct. Can we do bullets?
Yes, if you think that that is solving the problem, yes, absolutely. The form is completely up to you. You're trying to just solve the problem.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else has any needs any clarification? Okay, JB, go ahead.
What does it mean to solve the problem in 5 minutes? Is it like setting a plan to
no,
solve?
trying to solve the problem means, so for example, I'm trying to, like for example, let me give both the examples. For example, question, I'm trying to answer the question, how do I write 20 times what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a question. So I will come up with ideas of how to do it and try to work them out in as much detail where I feel comfortable that, okay, I will be able to write 20 times as much. The solution to the problem of, do you want to give me an example of a problem? It doesn't have to be your problem, but you can give me an example.
Yeah, I choose how to fully optimize my time, for instance. So I can get some ideas on how to optimize my time, but I won't consider the problem solved, because implementing them might be much harder than just saying, okay, I need to sleep 8 hours, or
okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So how to optimize, so to optimize, ideally, it's better to set kind of a more specific goal instead of just saying optimize. The problem is that is too vague a problem. So if you were to say, I want to optimize my time so that I get 5 times done, or twice as much what I'm doing per day. Now that is a problem. Like just optimize is a much more vaguer thing. So that's what I would recommend. Just if you have any doubts, just make it more specific.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anybody else has any questions? Let me see. No. Before, what if the goal is not visible in 5 minutes? How do we recognize? So I would say, Jonathan, just do the best you can at this point. If you can't actually, like, for example, if the goal is not visible, Jonathan, do you want to explain?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, like often goals, like big goals, are obviously not feasible in 5 minutes. So I'm just trying to reconcile, like, how do we apply this method in a way?
Okay. So Jonathan,
yeah.
Jonathan, that is a kind of a more philosophical question that we have talked about before. I don't want to interrupt people from this is actually about doing the exercise. And what we'll do is I'll answer this exact question towards at the end. Okay. Because right now we are saying, okay, what do we need to do for the next 5 minutes? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm starting a timer. You're trying to solve your problem or answer your question in 5 minutes. You can write it up, write it up somewhere. I strongly recommend writing. And I'm starting the timer now. We have about a minute to wrap up. Folks, let's wrap up in about 30 seconds, and then we'll begin. All right, folks, so now I would like to know about your experience of setting a tough objective and trying to actually achieve it in 5 minutes. What was your experience? So you can go ahead again, type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom to talk about your experience. Okay, Jim followed by Jean. Go ahead, and Joe. Jim,
Well,
go
it was
ahead.
very helpful to have a time limit and force myself to write things down, because I've had some ideas bouncing around in my head, but had not really formulated what the steps would be to solve the problem. In my case, it was preparing for the death of a parent. And not so much emotionally or psychologically, but what logistically would be required to deal with all the financial and logistical implications of it. And I knew that there was this cloud of uncertainty around it. But once I put pen to paper, it started to become much clearer all of the steps that I would need to go through, planning with my siblings and my parents and getting down to the nitty gritty of all the things that would have to be in place just so we would all be kind of more at ease with that eventuality.
Thank you.
So it was very helpful.
Thank you, Jim. Next one is Jean. Jean, go ahead.
Thanks. Although I think Robert Pan also had raised his hand before me.
I will come to him. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jean.
So it was interesting because as soon as I had the idea I was going to do this new innovative idea popped in my head that I'd never considered. So yeah, I actually thought about healing racism either in the States or worldwide. And the idea of having a reality TV show with some sort of like family swap, or they have this wife swap one where people live with people from a different background for a sustained amount of time and have that televised and supported and had guidelines for viewers and maybe experts in different areas commenting on the intersectional benefits, or, you know, just supporting everyone, psychologists supporting people to look at how this impacts their overall mental health and all of that.
I'll be there in a minute. I'm trying to
Just,
put this.
Mike, hold on. Okay, go ahead, Jean.
So the pressure basically helped me have some innovative ideas I hadn't really considered before.
Thank you. Bob, you can go next, but please keep it brief and about the experience of doing this exercise. Go ahead.
Well, do you want to hear the exercise?
No. Just
okay.
the experience of doing the exercise.
Experience only, so it's kind of an emotional answer.
Mm-hmm.
I felt harried, rushed, but at the same time, I thought that rather than solve the problem, provide an outline for solving the problem. That's what could be done in 5 minutes, an outline. but mostly I felt harried. I like 6 minutes, not 5 minutes. So
okay, that's fine. You know, people. Yeah, thank you, Bob. Okay. All right. So next up is Joe, Francoise, Jackie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I found it to be very, very helpful in the sense that I put my initial list down. And then what happened was I said, well, wait a minute, what about this? And then I started to see the gaps in my thinking. So the initial list was a really good start, but then I could start to actually see where I need to formulate, you know, this a particular thought a little bit more. So it really filled in the gaps, and it also, the 5 minutes was actually exhilarating to a certain degree. It's much more liberating than pondering the universe, which is what I tend to end up doing if I don't, whenever I'm in a writing exercise. But so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Francoise, Jackie, and Cameron.
So it's the first time I'm doing this exercise, and I think it's a question which cannot really be answered. But by not answering it and still thinking that it's a huge problem to be solved, I could put at least 14 perspectives, which can be classified in different areas to see how things can evolve and maybe sooner or later give an answer.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think all of these things are extremely, I mean, these are all the advantages, because like when you actually say, okay, I am going to solve it, many times, like for example, you know, Jim's example, it automatically, you know, your mind kind of sets him, okay, what do I need to do? And it draws upon your entire system one to produce everything that you possibly can to do that. The second thing is that it also, if you realize that you can't solve it, what you end up doing is that you end up doing something else, which is at least halfway. Like it could be a plan. So for example, for me, I said, okay, there's no way I can make it 20 times right away. I don't know how to do it 20 times, but 5 times I can do that. So then I made the plan for 5 times. So it was not the same one. So you can modify things as you, but it's the thing that is going to get me to 20 anyway. So it's like, so yes, you know, you learn a lot about the problem itself because you're leaving aside lots of preconceptions you have of problems. It's also, you're leaving aside all kinds of like emotional reluctance that you have. You are also leaving aside the sense that this is a very large problem. Just by saying that I'm going to try to solve it in 5 minutes, the problem looks very different.
Maybe I'm wrong. I apologize.
Yeah.
Five
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, folks. I had a slight interruption. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Who is Jackie? Go ahead. If you could repeat what you said.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't really answer the question. I was frustrated at first, and then I actually was able to challenge some hopelessness a little bit around it, which was, I think, part of, you know, really what you're looking for in terms of the experience was to break and lower that sense of hopelessness, which I was able to do, and that felt good.
Thank you. Next up is Cameron.
Yeah, I found that just the act of starting to write brought up new ideas, and there was a certain logical flow to it. So towards the end, I realized the implications. Or when I wrote down one solution, I said, oh, if I'm going to accomplish this, then I also have to accomplish this kind of ancillary solution. And I like how it came together. So I may have to reluctantly start writing things down some more. I learned something.
Yes. No. Writing is magical. I'm going to do a full meetup on, you know, the power of writing, what writing does to your mind. I think it's very profound. I mean, in short, what it does is that by putting what is in your head outside, it allows you to look at it externally. So it allows you to think about your thinking, which is very hard to do without being impacted by it. So it's it's a technology. It's it's the cutting edge technology. So I recommend it very highly. Now I might have lost a whole bunch of people who might have, because my chat reset. So I have Marco, but if there is anybody else who wanted to speak, please go ahead and type an exclamation mark again. Marco, you're next.
Yeah, I just found it that like I start the 5-minute help because like the timer helped because I started to kind of like go a little bit off topic, and then sort of like when there was a minute left, okay, then I sort of like tightened it up and got back to the point on track. And, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Shelley, you're next.
So for me, one of the things that I think setting a timer helps is it defines the space in which I'm thinking. So without the timer, I've tried to write before, but I feel very overwhelmed with the vastness of it. And so the timer helps narrow my focus down. I do think your question also, of course, does that, but I can see this being of benefit if you're writing about something, say, that is continuous. So then you think about it and write about it for 5 minutes. It's all contained. You get it done, and then you can walk away. And so it's not like this overwhelming, I need to write for an hour and a half. And oh my gosh, what do I write about? I have no idea. So I could see personally in so many ways this being incredibly helpful. Just the timer piece. I just love it. So anyway, my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Wenman, you want to ask your question in person, or shall I go ahead and answer it by chat? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Does physically writing them down or typing them down on a digital device make any difference? That's a very good question. Now, I prefer physical writing because pen and a paper is a much more advanced technology for this purpose than a computer. Because it is easier to kind of do structures. You can put words, you can arrange words, you can erase them. If you can do that very effectively on digital, you can do it on digital as well. But for me, I'm extremely visual. So kind of saying, okay, these are the 5 things, I put it in the shape, and then I'm trying to kind of work on them. I find that the technology, the sophistication of the digital technology hasn't caught up with that yet, but it's definitely you can do it in digital. If I don't have a pen and a paper, I do it using my phone as well. All right. Anybody else has any comments about the exercise? All right. So we will go to the next one, okay, which is step number 3. And this is the brainstorm cycle, okay? Now, you might think you have solved the problem, or you might think that you have not solved the problem, okay? It's important at this stage, especially if you think you have solved the problem, okay, is to go into a brainstorm cycle. Now, you would have to go into a brainstorm cycle anyway if you have not solved the problem, but it's very important to say that, okay, whatever it is that my subconscious produced the first time, I'm now going to assume that it is wrong. Okay, that it did not work. It was not the right answer. That is not the solution. And now what you're trying to do for 5 minutes is to come up with as many different things that will lead you there as you can possibly think of. Okay, don't be shy. It can be very wild. It could be completely off. Is it, there's no way that can be done. No, don't, you're not trying to judge the validity of things. You're trying to come up with as many possible paths as possible in 5 minutes. So is this clear? Does anybody have any questions about what we are trying to do? Jean, you have a question.
So you're saying further ideas, or you're playing devil's advocate to your current idea?
No, what you're saying is that whatever idea that you came up with first is all junk. It did not work. It's not the right idea. It failed. Okay. So you cut that path off. All right. Because that is what your mind automatically went to. Now you're cutting that off. Now you're asking yourself explicitly, what are the various ways in which I can do this? Okay, and so you're trying to now think wide. You're trying to think wild. You're trying to say, okay, what, if you thought only of you doing something, then think of other people, getting other people involved. But just think, think broadly and try to come up with as many different ways.
I'm not sure I understand. So I should decide that my first idea was completely off.
Was off.
And
now
then
you're trying to come up with as many different ways. You're not trying to solve the problem now. You're saying, how might you possibly solve the problem? What was the problem that you were saying?
Healing racism.
Okay, so healing racism. So first idea that you came up with did not work.
Okay.
What are the various ways in which racism can be healed? What are the possible ways in which it can be done? Try to think as large scope as possible, as diverse as possible, as small steps as possible, as some things that don't involve you at all possible. Just as many, this is the brainstorming session. So for 5 minutes, we are trying to do that. So when asked, the first approach is to simplify, the second exercise is to complicate things. No, that's not true at all. The first one is you're trying to solve the problem. The second one, you're saying that did not work. And now you're trying to see all the possible things of solving the problem. That's what you're trying to do. All right, folks, if it is clear, if nobody has any clarifications, needs any clarification, I'm starting. Yes, JB, go ahead.
Yeah, what if the first step led to a bunch of possible solutions? Like, I mean,
yes.
A mix of solutions, then what should we do?
Okay, so if the first one resulted in a bunch of solutions, then at this stage, you're going to say all of those are not good enough. Try to come up with a whole new bunch of solutions. So you're trying to basically widen the scope of what you were thinking as possible solutions. Okay. All right, folks, I'm setting the timer for 5 minutes. Let's start. We have 2 minutes left. One minute. All right, folks, let's wrap it up in 30 seconds. All right, so now everybody can share the experience of doing this. Step 3, the brainstorming step. Anybody who wants to share, they can just type exclamation mark and go from there. So it's going to be Jean, Françoise, Jim, Cameron.
So I noticed that my answers this time were kind of the opposite of the energy or the direction of my previous answer. Instead of having a global collective kind of team solution, I suggested churches handle it, schools handle it, government handles it. And that went on for a while. And then I kind of thought about experts who are already doing this work leading it. Then I thought Jordan Peterson could lead this, or the Dalai Lama could lead this. Jordan Peterson probably wouldn't want to lead this, but who knows? Anyway, maybe we should just let some out there expert give their take on it. Then I thought of other ideas like chanting, for everybody to just chant individually and have them think of their own solutions, and then have young people lead this, have maybe start with a police force and use that as the test case, or maybe encourage all the oppressions and go in the other direction, because sometimes exaggerating the contradiction can create a new solution, or maybe just acceptance of racism as part of life and reality, and see where that gets us. So those are my ideas.
That's wonderful. I mean, this is exactly what happens. Like, this is the whole purpose of the brainstorming cycle. It's saying that whatever you are thinking of, patterns along which you're thinking of, normally we are kind of prone, because of all our biases, to kind of just double up on those. This is a way of cutting that off, so that it allows your mind to kind of explore kind of wider. Next up is Françoise.
Yeah, so looking at the first exercise, I realized that the question is unanswerable. So I had 14 things, but on the second exercise, I put to the question, why am I asking this question? And by looking at the reason of asking the question, I came up with another 12 consideration, which are very much into the same ideas, but from a completely different perspective.
Wow. Wow. Excellent. Next up is Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I found that this time all of my ideas were either less convenient, more expensive, or would cause more drama than my original solution. I did come up with one thing at the very end, which was complementary to the first set, that was positive, but everything else was inferior.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Cameron.
Yeah, I found that the first part of the exercise was very single-minded towards one goal. It was really practical and it built on it itself. And then the second one was just really creative and fun to come up with. Like one of the solutions I came up with without providing any context was to purchase a Russian order mail bribe. And honestly, I didn't see that coming, but it came.
Okay. Okay, that's delightful. Next one is Christian. Christian, go ahead.
So the first cycle of brainstorming, I was really practical. So the problem that I had was I was answering the question of how do I enable my organization skills to flourish at home, because I'm not the most organized person. So I've been working on this since I've been home and I've been finished with school. And then the second cycle of brainstorming was kind of outlandish, where I kind of started talking about hiring Marie Kondo to come in and organize my space and following her example afterwards and things like that. So, but I did come up with a couple of good solutions as well. So that was good.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is that the beautiful thing about these brainstorming things is that though initial ideas that you might come up with may be outlandish, like for example, hiring Kondo, maybe you can do something in between, like, you know, you can get a friend who is a big fan of Kondo and has been applying it a lot and make a deal with them who may be able to help you, something like that. So it's like, even if the first take on the brainstorming is maybe off, you may be able to repurpose them in the following cycles to kind of fix it. Next one up is Michael. Michael, go ahead.
You're talking about
yes.
Okay, sorry, I was in the middle of eating. Are there any innovators, historical figures who repeatedly use this type of exercise, whether it was in one or more industries or in their personal lives? Do you know of any of those?
No. Michael, we are just looking at your experience of doing this exercise.
Oh, okay. I just said it was more efficient the second time around. It was a lot of time saved with what I produced.
Excellent. Thank you. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I mean, this really was, it started out a little bit hard, but it actually, after I got going, I had, you know, some similar experiences to everyone else, but it really opened up and expanded my circle and got me out of my own head. And that was the beauty of that. It was like, wow, okay, there are so many other ways to leverage other deep insights that I had not been thinking about. Instead of just thinking about how to get it done, I was thinking about whatever everybody else could bring to the table. So that was my experience. It was really, really helpful.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Bob, Marco, and Rebecca. Bob, go ahead.
For my first 5 minutes, I had 7 bullets. And since none of them are allowed, I never asked others for help. So I thought about asking others for help. And then my other solution was to rant and rave and scream of frustration that I wasn't getting an answer.
Okay. Next up is Marco. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, it definitely helped to like open up my view about it. And yeah, I definitely found like I kind of felt like a kid, like, and so, yeah, that good feeling kind of helped bring about more and different solutions and more positivity.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you like to talk about your experience?
No, it was useful, but I don't really have anything extra to add, but thanks.
Sure. Next one is Wen.
Hi. Yeah, I found it useful for both exercises because the second one actually brush against the first one, and they brush against each other. So let me examine if my first one, the simple answer is it sincere, is it real, or just lazy?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me see. Who else has a question? It's just a lot of comments. I'm not able to tell. Okay. Sarah. Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, the first time I found it easier because I found it like a meditation. Basically, I had to focus on only one solution, and all the thoughts the other thoughts, like all the what if that I had, I had to throw it away. So I had to really be quick and think about what I really, really want. And the second one was all the what if that it was hard for me at first. I was kind of, I just wanted to focus on the solution that I found, but then I was open-minded. I tried to be open-minded, and all the what if that I had before, I could bring them into bullet points. So it actually opened my mind in a different way. Yeah.
Excellent. So what we're going to do is that we're going to do breakout rooms for about 25 minutes, where you guys can discuss, how. So the questions to discuss are, what was your experience solving these two, during these cycles? Do you typically get less done in 5 minutes than you did during this cycle? If so, how can you do this? How can you use this to do more thinking during your day, each of your day? Can you list 10 tough problems you could try to solve using these techniques? So these are suggested questions for the breakout rooms. I'm opening the breakout rooms now, and then we'll come back, share our takeaways, and then we will go ahead. I have some more comments on how to use this method on a much larger scale than we've talked about. Okay, I'm opening the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. So now we're going to go and talk about our takeaways. And then depending on, I'm going to put together kind of the general comments that you have. And I also have 4 other points, kind of advanced points that rest on these. So it's going to be, I'm going to call upon people in the order in which I see them on my Zoom. If you want to be skipped, you can just type skip in chat. So it's going to be Jean, Ludmila, and Michael next. Jean, go ahead.
Thank you. It was interesting. I didn't understand the idea that in 5 minutes you're supposed to actually solve the problem. I mean, I thought it was conceptualize the solution, which might be the same thing. Anyway, but Jonathan says there's an actual article that I should read that says, no, he wants you to actually solve it. Okay, well, anyway, but I am excited about using this in places that I have been stuck. I'm excited to think about, my career. What have I been biased towards in terms of the solutions I've been creating, and what other directions probably are in my blind spot? Maybe around carbs, how many carbs I eat a day. Maybe there's another way of approaching it that I have just not been seeing. So yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Ludmila, what are your takeaways from this meetup? You're on mute right now.
As I said in this chat room, that actually I was trying to apply this not to a personal idea, as I found many people did, but to scientific ideas that I am working on now. And I would say that actually we discussed it during this time, that between the first and second brainstorm, it's good to use the time to collect the information on the topic, because then it's just kind of useless.
Next one is Michael, followed by Michael, Françoise, and Jackie. Michael, go ahead.
Okay. So what this activity reminded me of is, and the takeaway is that with time pressure, more tension results, and out of that tension, there's more possibility of birthing in general.
Thank you. Next up is Françoise, Jackie, and JB.
I definitely.
Sorry, Francoise. I always mispronounce.
Yes, I know.
Sorry.
I only took you up once, but I'm still the unique one. No problem. So the whole idea is fantastic. I hope I can use it more often because it's a tool which goes with goal setting and putting a critical question, and it would help you to do deconstruction. You know, all the things which comes with the question of the problem is a deconstruction of what you can look on the side. And it's a tool for process. You know, it's not really solving the problem, but it's on the road. You know, it's a good cane to follow the road to the success. So it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jackie, JB, and Joe.
I am taking away, realizing that for me, this can apply to both emotional as well as rational problems and or questions. And I like that. That's exciting. I don't think there's a limit to this. It's not necessarily rational per se. It's a rational approach toward emotions or emotional situation. And we had a conversation about it opened up the question, where might it be helpful to practice or how this might open up our beginner's mind, you know, where we don't want to reference our past and pull from the past versus, and how do we really tap that beginner's mind, that fresh mind? That's what I'm kind of walking away with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is JB, Joe, and Darren. JB, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the idea we discussed in the breakout room was the fact that time limits enables to get rid of emotions, and so to really be really focusing on all the different ideas without any ethical consideration or anything that enable more the mind to be more open. And another thing that we discussed was the importance of adding some input of information in the process, because we might not have all the required ideas inside our brain to solve the problem in the most effective way. And so we can use Google or to ask to seek for advice in our social environment. So yeah.
Thank you, JB. Next up is Joe, Darren, and Wen. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This has actually been an incredibly insightful exercise in the sense that actually having gone through it, I realized the time constraint is actually not a constraint, and that it's actually liberating in how you come up with new ideas that you wouldn't otherwise have come up with, especially when it comes to the imagination exercise. So there was this like inverse relationship where I always think to myself, I don't have enough time to do that, where now I realize just take 5 minutes, do this exercise, and maybe you'll come up with things that you had not otherwise thought of. It also is liberating in the sense that when you come up with an idea, even if you can you know, negate it as something as a possibility, but it still may spur another idea that you would have otherwise never have had. So I think that those are two really critical things, and it's going to help me quite a bit with my writing. I'm pretty excited about this. This was eye-opening.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Darren, Wen, and Jeff.
So in our conversation, I kind of noticed an interesting pattern that in the brainstorm process, it kind of did this progression. Mine in particular went from like, what can I do to solve this? What are my skills, or how can I personally resolve this problem? And over time, it slowly moved towards who can help me do this, and how can I look outside of myself to address this. And meanwhile, someone else did the exact opposite, where I looked outside first and eventually moved towards a more, well, what's my personal responsibility in this? And I thought that was an interesting pattern.
Excellent. Thank you. Next up is Wen, Jeff, and Cameron.
Okay. I actually learned a lot in this exercise because I usually tend to think too much. So writing them down plus with a deadline to consolidate all my ideas are really, really useful. But I cannot do it myself because if I'm not in a group, I know this concept intellectually and I never really use it or utilize it. So being in a group and have this kind of discussion kind of just help me and hold me, kind of accountable for, something I should have done long time ago, And so this is the power in the group.
Thank you. Thank you, Wen. Next up is Jeff, Cameron, and Jim. Jeff, go ahead.
So I thought this was really both wonderful and insightful and useful. I realize that's more than both. And the interesting thing for me is that I'm often involved in helping people make decisions by first trying to get them to identify what the most important criteria that a solution would need to satisfy. And that's not as easy as you might think. And so this method of examining, of brainstorming possible solutions in that two-step process, and then looking at, okay, so what possible criteria do these ideas satisfy and which of them seem most important, feels like a really important better way of doing it. And so that's among the things I gained from this.
Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Cameron. Jim. Yes, go ahead.
Interestingly, it started off with just trying to solve one particular problem, but I appreciated the philosophical implications that came out of thinking about decision-making from a more meta level. So in our discussion, we touched on the relationship between machine learning and human decision-making and how those intersect. So I found the philosophical implications to be quite interesting.
Thank you. Next up is Jim, Marco, and Jonathan. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is that I need to write things down more. So I spend a lot of time in my head, and the exercise of focused writing was just very valuable. The other takeaway from our side discussion was that sometimes you have to entertain or at least explore options that initially seem way out of bounds in order to identify other things that are between where you are and where this out of bounds idea is that might be reasonable, right? And that's useful.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Next up is Marco, Jonathan, and Christian. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I learned that that basically like solving problems don't have to be like a chore. Like it was kind of like fun. There was like a little bit of excitement doing it as well. So yeah, I could like going forward.
Thank you. Next up is Jonathan, Christian, and Mike.
I guess for me, it's sort of interesting, just personally, like how I sort of have more trouble with the meaning of what it is for goals and how they work within each other than other people seem to do, and that could be for my personality type. But I'm just the act of breaking the bigger goals into smaller goals and how to aim at them is something that trips me up. Even though, that being said, I've had like excellent success with this method. So it's just something I think I need to sort of. I think this method is good, and people adopt it for their own way of thinking, and their own, like, not get too hung up on the immediate metrics of the time and 5 minutes. It's more the actual act of setting constraints to change your relationship to how you're tackling your goals, I think, is the important thing. So that's something I'm going to re-examine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So it's going to be Christian, Mike, and Loy. Christian, go ahead.
So I had a couple of takeaways. I was kind of skeptical about generating enough ideas that were going to work, but I really enjoyed the 5 minutes because it really got me to zero in on possible solutions to the issue that I was working through for this exercise. And my second takeaway was that I felt like the second brainstorming was unneeded. But then once I started to do that, I generated even more possible solutions to the issue. So I thought that was very valuable as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Next up is Mike, Loy, and E. Mike, go ahead.
The second process pointed out that, kept pointing back to the fact that I might have been wrong about saying the solution I discarded won't work, and kept pointing out to try to find things that were wrong with it, and that pointed toward refining that solution and made the original solution better. Came up with a bunch of suboptimal solutions that that could be used to defend what might be other people's solutions against other people's solutions that I considered that would be alternatives that might be considered, that might be pointed out against the one I came up with. So I like the method, and I see refinements. One of your audience suggested that that you you use that to create a work breakdown structure to make it into small, more doable tasks, and I like that too. So,
thank you.
All good thinking.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Loy, John, and Anna. Loy, go ahead.
What I learned during the breakout, I was not much of a participant, but I listened in, and I learned something from Jeff that could be very useful in combination with this method is to have a partner. After you do, not necessarily exactly as he described it, but do your thing and then have discuss with a partner within that limited time. The other thing I thought of is this method could be very useful in combination in the method we learned last week is to have a focus 5 minutes or even 10 minutes and then write it down and walk away to let the process and let your mind work on it and come back to it later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Loy. Next up is John, followed by Anna. John? John, are you there? Okay, Anna?
This John?
No, sorry. John Hamilton.
This John? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was supposed to do skip.
Oh, you said skip. You're welcome to skip.
No, I didn't, and I didn't realize that I needed to. So now that you've called on me, I also found this very intriguing, and look forward to your suggestion to try to use it for the upcoming week. And I presume we'll talk about it, our experiences next Sunday, or is next Sunday a new topic?
Next Sunday at 1:30 we'll talk about it. So I have 4 points actually 5 points to sum everything up. One, you have to realize that this is only 12-minute at most exercise. So 1 minute to choose your goal, 5 minutes to do the first, the step 2, then maybe a break in the middle. I definitely recommend maybe a 1 minute break in the middle before you do the next one, or you can have a even little bit lengthy break. That's fine, but it's a unit of less than 15 minutes of time. Okay, that's all it is, and that's the beauty of it. It's a very limited commitment from you and it is so you're aiming for the sky, and you're basically giving a penny, for $1 or something like that. So that's the beauty of it. The second thing is notice the structure of it. Normally people do brainstorming first, and then they pick something and spend all their time on it. This is you're actually trying to come up with a solution first and then doing the brainstorming. So built into this method is like plan A, and you already have plan Bs ready if the plan A does not work. Okay, so it kind of leaves you with not only a best possible way to proceed, but alternate ways that you can fall back upon if you need to do that. The third thing I want to say is that, we have many 15 minutes in a day. So there is no reason, if you think that you're able to get a lot done in 15 minutes, then why not use it more? Now, it depends on personalities. Some people are really, really kind of frazzled by this, and they find it hard. I don't find it hard at all. Some people don't find it hard at all. So what I end up doing is I have actually, if I decide that I want to work pretty hard for the next hour or two, I will just set an interval timer that goes off every 5 minutes. And every 5 minutes, I have an opportunity of kind of setting up a new goal and going after it. It could be, so it's a very flexible way of applying it on as much base as I can or I want to. But just that being reminded every 5 minutes of saying, okay, what should be my purpose? And recalibrating it, I find that it improves. I do this at work. I do this many times during the weekends over a certain period of time when I'm trying to get something done. And what happens is that we end up spending a lot of time. You get into some mode and you end up spending a lot of time without realizing that you have spent a lot of time. This is a way of kind of refocusing on things that matter to you. So that's, so for example, on my iPhone, I have an app called the interval timer or something like that. You choose an app whose sound is not that disturbing and stuff like that. So you have to optimize for that. And I just have that going. The next thing I want to, the fourth point I want to make is that this is ideal for recursive application. We are shooting for the moon, but in shooting for the moon, you might find that you can't get there in one step. So you can then, suppose you have 4 things that you need to do, you can do one of these 12, 15-minute cycles on a sub part of it. That's going to allow you to make a progress in that direction. Last one, I want to talk to you about how to apply this to plans. This is, again, I want to describe it very briefly. Most people, when they make plans, they just make a plan and they are done. Really powerful, if actually achieving that goal is really important to you, the first time you come up with a plan is probably not going to be good enough. So there is a very simple method that is there, which is kind of actually based on this method that I use for plans. It's called Murphy Jitsu. It's based on Murphy's law that if something can go wrong, it will. So you just make a plan. Suppose you say that, okay, I'm going to write, suppose I'm saying that I'm going to write 20 times as much, within 3 weeks or within 6 weeks. Then I say, and I make a plan to do that. This is how I'm going to do it. Once you've done that, you simply say to yourself, it failed. And then you ask yourself, why did it fail? And you'd be surprised, automatically a whole bunch of answers will come to your mind. Oh, it failed because of this. Oh, it failed because of that. Because those are the common reasons why it is likely to fail. And then you redo the plan to account for that, to make sure that that does not happen. And you do that up to a point where you feel genuinely surprised when you say the sentence that it failed. You should feel, oh, how could it possibly fail now? So that's another example of kind of using these methods recursively. So this is not one time, but recursively. And the core thing is actually doing this. So the recommendation I have is that at the minimum, try to do it once a day between now and next week. If you're more ambitious, try to set up a 5-minute timer and do as much as you can. Don't drive yourself crazy, but do as much as you can. And then you can, please come back next Sunday at 1:30, where we will do a follow-up to see what experiences you've had. And we can do, learn from learn from each other about how to use this well in all kinds of situations. All right. And then next week at 2:30, I'm going to be talking about Ray Dalio's idea of the cycles of goal setting. Of, how do you set ambitious goals? How do you face problems? How do you get to the root causes? How do you make a plan, and how do you execute? And what is involved in doing that? So that's coming up next time at 2:30. So thank you very much for coming. I always appreciate you folks spending the time with us. I think all of us are learning a lot from that, including myself, probably me more than anybody else. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful, and we'll see you next time.